Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another episode of the Classroom Series, a series where I teach you everything you need to know about sewing to become an expert sewist, to gain new skills, and to just grow your creativity and your confidence. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a very important skill and technique that you need to know how to do in most sewing projects, and that is hemming. Hemming is incredibly easy once you understand how to properly do it, and it's also very customizable based on your project, how thick or thin you want your hem to be, and how you might want to lengthen or shorten a garment or a project that you're working on. Now, it is important to note that there are different ways of hemming fabric, depending on the fabric you're using, how you want your hem to look, or the curve or the straightness of an edge of fabric. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you the most basic hem, the hem that I taught all of my students and required them to use on most of their projects, and the hem that you are probably going to use the most frequently when sewing. Hemming is the process of folding up a raw edge of fabric in order to encase the raw edge so that it doesn't fray. Hemming allows us to finish the edges of garments or the edges of projects by simply folding up that edge the desired width. Since hemming is very customizable given your project or your preferences, all you have to do to adjust and change your hem is simply change how much you fold up the edge of your fabric. You can do this by measuring how much you fold it up, or fold it up given the desired look you want your hem to have. The most common hems are going to be 1 inch or 1/2 inch hems, and those are going to be the two hems that I'm going to show you how to complete in today's video. In order to hem, all you need is a sewing machine, scissors, fabric, and a handy dandy tool called a seam gauge. Now, if you don't have a seam gauge, you could use a tape measure, but I'm going to recommend that you have a seam gauge as it helps you to create the most accurate hem measurements. And this is what a seam gauge looks like. It's a small metal tool that has different measurements that come in both inches and centimeters. The great things about seam gauges is that they keep their shape unlike a tape measure. And there's also this plastic knob that you can move to your desired measurement for your hem to make sure that every time you fold up your fabric, it accurately folds to your desired measurement without shifting and changing. So without further ado, let's learn how to hem fabric.
Our first hem in today's video is going to be the 1 inch hem. Using our seam gauge, we are going to move the plastic knob to the 1/2 inch mark. This is the fold that we are going to do first on our raw edge of our fabric that we want to hem. Using our seam gauge, we are going to fold our fabric up to that 1/2 inch mark where our plastic knob was placed. Then using our iron, we are going to press the fabric down so that the fold equals 1/2 inch. And we are going to use our seam gauge to make sure and double check that our fabric is indeed folded and pressed to 1/2 inch. After we've pressed it with our iron, we can then double check once again that our fold is 1/2 inch. After we have pressed that initial raw edge up 1/2 inch, we are then going to move the plastic knob of our seam gauge to the 1 inch mark. This is how this hem gets the name 1 inch hem. Now, using our seam gauge, we are going to fold the already 1/2 inch folded edge up to the 1 inch mark now. We are going to use our iron to now press that 1 inch fold and double check it with our seam gauge. This is going to be the official fold for our hem, the fold that we are going to be stitching down. We are going to double check that fold to make sure it's 1 inch with our seam gauge, and then we are going to place pins along that fold to stitch. Now, taking our fabric over to our sewing machine, we are going to sew right along the edge of where that 1 inch hem is folded. Lowering our presser foot and lowering our needle, we're going to backstitch, and then we are going to sew a straight line right along the edge of our 1 inch folded hem. Make sure to take out your pins as you're sewing, and keep an eye that your stitch is right along the edge. And don't forget when you get to the end to backstitch once again. Once you have completed your seam, your hem is officially done, and this is what your 1 inch hem will look like on your fabric. Our next hem is the 1/2 inch hem. Using our seam gauge, we are going to move our plastic knob to the 1/2 inch mark, similarly to how we first started off our 1 inch hem. Using our seam gauge, we are going to make sure that our raw edge is folded up 1/2 inch and pressed down. And we're going to double check that measurement with our seam gauge. Our next fold for this hem is also going to be 1/2 inch, so there's no need to adjust the placement of our seam gauge. Folding up our already 1/2 inch folded edge of fabric, we are then going to fold it up another 1/2 inch and press down. The title of 1/2 inch hem comes from the fact that our last fold is going to be 1/2 inch. So again, this 1/2 inch hem is folded 1/2 inch and another 1/2 inch. Then you're going to place your pins in your fabric and get ready to sew. Now we're going to take our fabric over to our sewing machine, putting our presser down and our needle down. We are going to stitch right along the folded edge where our pins are placed. We're going to backstitch at the beginning and then continue sewing a straight line all the way to the end. Keep in mind that you want your seam to be right along the folded top edge where your pins are placed. As always, you want to make sure that you backstitch at the end of your seam as well. And this is what your 1/2 inch hem will look like.
And here are our 2 completed hem samples. This sample right here is our 1/2 inch hem, and this sample right here is our 1 inch hem. As you can see, the depth at which our seam is sewn differs based on the thickness of the hem. This is something you're going to want to keep in mind when applying hems to your projects, as you do see the seam. So if you want to have a thinner hem, you might want to opt for the 1/2 inch hem option. If you would like a thicker hem, you might choose the 1 inch option. And there you have it. This is how you hem fabric in the most basic and straightforward way. In future videos, I will tackle different ways that you can hem different types of fabric and in different methods. But for now, this is the hem that you're going to be using the most frequently, and the hem that I usually suggest you start out using when you're new to sewing or in all sewing projects.